we're live. And
Hi, Mike.
hey man, so my guest today is Philippe Longchamps. Am I saying it right, Longchamps?
Pretty well, yes.
I
Nice
studied
accent.
I studied
Yeah.
2 years in high school with Mrs. Bjorkman French, and I loved it.
Uh-huh.
I learned a little French. So you are from Sherbrooke in Quebec. So you are
Yes.
Quebecois, and I don't know if they're all like you, but you might be an extraordinary Quebecois. But you've had a pretty extraordinary life so far, and you're pretty young still. But under your belt, you have
Thanks.
you pretty much mastered the art of baseball to the point where you played elite baseball in Sweden, and you've had an amazing little scholarly career, writing articles about Chilean presidents and dictators, and been winning awards about those. And it's early, and you've gone on to be in a chart-topping band, Atlas Volt, in Sweden. And then you became a teacher, but not just a teacher, but an award-winning teacher, because you had an innovative approach. I think many innovative approaches to teaching, and synthesizing kind of your personality, which I think is a global kind of approach, a Renaissance approach to incorporating history and geography and technology, in which I think seems pretty much like smart and not obvious, but definitely from my point of view, since I'm kind of a Renaissance lover myself, I think that that's right. And you're getting results, which who could be surprised by that? And I'm sure your kids absolutely love you. And I've seen some of the love letters they've written to you on the piece of paper describing you, which are hilarious. So why don't you do me a favor and explain yourself to the audience too, because I'm sure I missed something.
Well, it's quite hard. I don't know where to start because, like you kind of described, I'm a bit all over the place.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to like deal with that name you just gave me, Renaissance man, because I try to be a polymath. I try to become at least above average in a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that since I'm a kid, I never managed really to specialize in anything and become like a real virtuoso in an instrument or anything like that. But I made the choice of trying a lot of things and try to develop as many interests as possible. And of course, I was from the start, just like you, a dreamer. And once you have a spark, once you start loving something and you put your heart into it, it doesn't feel like you're practicing or you're trying to you're working. You just like enjoy what you do, and results come. So I think that I don't have much merit to that because, like I said, as a kid already, I was a dreamer. First, I wanted to become an astronaut. So that passion. I know that you love to draw. I also love drawing. I was daydreaming in class, sketching different buildings and drawing the Empire State Building and the Taj Mahal and the Golden Gate as my teachers were explaining stuff. And I was not like probably the best student in my early years. But yeah, I was like, I got like easily hooked, and these things became passions. Like you mentioned, very early on, I started to love baseball, and when I did that, I was like all in. I wanted to be like a team player. I wanted to train hard. I was spending hours throwing balls on a wall. In my parents' place, actually in the suburbs of Sherbrooke and Rock Forest.
Mm-hmm.
And funny, it's that region of Quebec where all the names are in English, but everyone speaks French.
Right.
And but I mean, I really try to like improve all the time. That's the thing. And like I was telling my mom, my dream was to become a Major League Baseball player. And of course, it's hard to compete with you guys in the United States, where in Quebec we have 6 months of summer, 5 months max of summer, where you can't really compete with people from Arizona or Florida or California, where they can play all year long. So when I understood that it would never happen, I still played for fun. But like you described, one thing that was nice is that when I moved to Sweden, I had the chance to start playing baseball again. And since when I do something, I do it like with gusto and I want to do it well, I started to train really hard and played for a few teams. And these teams went from second division to first division to Elite Series. And in 2008, we managed to win the Swedish Cup in Redvik, a small town 11 hours north from here. And back in the days, my wife and I were living in that region of Sweden, which is like the picturesque Sweden you can imagine. But really, like when I put my heart into something, I really want to achieve something great. And that experience in sport, I can transfer it into my teaching today. But it's this approach of like really giving 100% in everything you do that I keep from that time, because I was not the most talented player, and I was not like I needed to train more than my teammates to be
Okay,
as good.
let's stop right there. Let's stop.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to. This to me is an important point. Because when I read about you and I hear you and I always things a million miles a minute go in my head. But I wanted to stop
Yeah.
you here because my little brother Mark ended up being in the Little League World Series, and like
Wow.
he was very aspirational. He wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, and so I watched him, and he would hit. We had these garden rocks, and he had a metal pipe, and he'd hit these rocks into the forest all day. And if he wasn't doing that, he was throwing a ball against the garage, and we had to rebuild the wall like 3 or 4 times. He ruined the garage doors. So he was like actually knocking down walls. And if he wasn't doing that, he was watching the Cubs, because we lived in Chicago. He was watching the Cubs play. So I watched this kid, my little brother, become an amazing infielder, hitter, pitcher. And I'm thinking, and I think that the idea of hitting a rock with a pipe, it goes to like Suzuki training of over practice, or overtraining, where you're basically doing something actually harder than hitting a baseball with a bat. You're hitting a pipe with a little rock. And I think about the Brazilians when they trained their soccer players, they have a different sport where they're in a little room playing with a little ball. And it's a much harder little, I forget what that's called, but it's a harder.
I think it's called the Aki sack.
Yeah. And it's harder to do, but when they get on the field with the big fat, inflated ball, it's like easy. So that overtraining idea, I think. So my question to you is, do you think that playing baseball as a kid taught you how to train universally for anything? Like it taught you how to, that you had that success where you focused and got better. Did that give you confidence in learning? Like you speak 3-4 languages. Most Americans are very intimidated by learning a second language, let alone a fourth. So did that give you confidence? Like you knew that you knew how to learn?
I think so. Yes, I think it played a role. I mean, everything plays a role. Everything adds up in the end. And but baseball is my opinion, a very intellectual sport.
Yeah.
It's not only the physical aspect and the athletic aspect. It's like strategy. It's like playing chess also. So all these strategies, receiving signals, for example, and it is something that is stimulating. And I mean, I was so passionate. I mean, you mentioned the Cubs. I was a Montreal Expos fan all my childhood. Now the team has moved to Washington, unfortunately. But I love the Cubs because when we got American TV for the first time back home in Quebec, when we started to have cable TV at home, the Cubs were always on when I came back to school, because at Wrigley Field they didn't have any lights. So they were playing only afternoon games. Right. So I mean, the Cubs, they were my second favorite team. And I'm watching baseball there, and I got inspired between innings. I was going to throw like your brother. But fortunately, we had a brick wall at home, so we didn't need to reconstruct. But I think that the team spirit and the sports psychology, I still use it in class, because I really think that working as a team. So if I teach my students to collaborate and also in my work team, also I've got fantastic colleagues, and the way we work together as we integrate different subjects, we teach in a much more integrative way, and we help each other. This way we are able to become a super teacher together. So the same thing with my students. I love to provide material for them, and ask them to work in an active way, and they interact, and it's fantastic when you are explaining to a whole class that a team is as good as its weakest player, and everyone is trying to lift each other up. So if someone is struggling with something, those who have like more skill, for example, or find it a bit easier, will help everyone, and everyone benefits from that attitude. So that sports psychology is really important to import in my classroom.
Right. Now, yeah, to explain to the audience, you work at a Montessori school, which is not the norm in Sweden, right?
Mhm.
But is it still a state subsidized school, or is it completely private?
It is a free school, a private school, but
Mhm.
all schools in Sweden are state
Right, right.
financed.
But you,
So
but
regardless,
do you have more because it's a Montessori school and private? Do you have more latitude to be creative with the way you organize your teachers? You're the head of the bilingual department, is that correct?
no, they call it högstadiet, so it's like grade 7 to 9.
Hmm.
So here they divide like primary school into three cycles,
Right,
3 years. And I'm in charge of a work team from the teachers who are teaching grade 7 to 9.
right.
We're a group of 14 or 15 people.
Oh wow! So and you
Yeah,
help you help lead this team and have them
yeah,
work as a team and you explain your integrative approach because it seems like a moving animal and I want to get a sense of how you guys do this because it's just fascinating to me.
yeah. I mean, I started like more than a decade ago to
Mhm,
try to integrate. First of all, like when you look at a subject like mathematics, for
mhm.
example, it's already divided into like some small. There's some branches. There's geometry, and there's like algebra and whatsoever. So this one is more like I would define this more as intradisciplinary. So it's mathematics, and there's like small branches. And first, we used to work in a multidisciplinary way. But the thing is that we have a theme, and then all these different elements are not really overlapping. Like everyone is talking about, for example, um, we find a theme, for example, human rights, and everyone is talking about this in their different subjects, but we're not trying to really integrate them. So the first real step, it's evolutionary in a way, is progressive. I think that colleagues have to get together. I mean, you can do it if you teach more than one subject, but if you try to integrate in a interdisciplinary way, sorry, but just putting two subjects together. First of all, imagine like I teach geography and my colleague Cecilia teaches physics.
Mhm.
Then why don't we teach it as one, as geophysics? And it makes this learning experience more sustainable for the students. Instead of having two tests, they will have one in geophysics where they see the link between physics and geography, and they see that the content is quite similar in their books. So we merge them together, and instead of having like, I'm not a big fan of standardized tests, I must say, but if we need to do one just to assess their level, then we can do it in an integrative way. And the next step is that when you start to integrate more other subjects, then it becomes cross-disciplinary and then transdisciplinary, and we focus on where the subjects are overlapping. So when we work with projects and contests like this, we can integrate like 5 6 different subjects if like we manage to collaborate and do like we plan together and we grade together. And of course in the end, when we add the element of like the way the students are feeling about their progress, and the way, like I mentioned before, the sports psychology, the fact that they have this team spirit, that they're not competing with the other classes either, that they are like feeling that they belong to the same school. You have less like tribal competition between class A and B, for example. You have an added value here, this emotional aspect that makes the kids feel good about themselves, which makes this transdisciplinary approach much more holistic. And there really we get the sustainability in education. People will always remember the way something makes them feel. I
Right.
mean, we can forget formulas, we can forget what we studied in the evening before a test. And often it was my case when I was a student, I was like pretty good at memorizing stuff in the short-term memory. I was taking the test, I was having a good grade, I was showing off to mom and dad, but then I forgot about it a week after.
Mhm.
Um, and now the thing that if you add the emotional aspect, if you make the students feel good about their accomplishment, about their progress, and if you measure their success and progress, you add this holistic approach that makes the learning sustainable. And now here, I'm not talking about sustainability in the environmental way. I
Right.
talk about like long lasting, lifelong learning. And that is essential for the future of our students
So the mission is
worldwide,
right. Yeah.
worldwide.
Yeah. So the mission
Yeah.
is it sounds like this is very goal oriented and it's ultimate goal oriented, because the ultimate goal is not in America. I think sometimes the goal is to be a pass through, a gatekeeper. So algebra, for instance, is the great gatekeeper. If you can't get to calculus, you lose. Right? That's the function of pretty much algebra, because no one uses it mostly. So the function has been historically that it's your only way to get to calculus, and calculus was your gateway to college, right, or to engineering, for instance. So, but college too. So there's this gatekeeper function. So it's always win lose. There's no teamwork at all. The only holistic time in algebra was maybe in trigonometry, where then you could apply it to problems. That's why I loved trigonometry, because it was problem solving and it was implied physics and ballistics. And so I really loved geometry and trigonometry because there was pictures and I kind of enjoyed the problem. So,
and of course, you must love statistics, since you and your brother love baseball.
I can't say that. No, I think my brother, though, he had all of our dressers in our room were filled with cards. So he collected cards. So I had no place to put my clothes because they were filled with hockey, baseball, and that was cards. So he knew his statistics, he knew his RBIs and all that stuff. Absolutely.
Yep.
So I didn't. But and I've never been a statistics guy. But my point, if I could finish it, please,
yes,
because I will forget what I'm talking about, is that there is a like you said, it was really important. You said feeling, like, and Americans think like, oh, feelings. It's not about feeling good. It's about when it's testing and man up. But you're not talking about feelings like coddling children and giving them awards for showing up. That's not what you're talking about. You're talking about the feeling of experiencing their mind, the feeling of experienced learning, real learning, the feeling of experiencing working together for a goal that's whether it's a project or or helping other people, feeling good about good things. Is that that's what you're talking about, right?
Absolutely. And the feeling of, like, if you feel that you're making progress, regardless where you start, we all start at different levels. As long as you're making progress, it's success in my book. And the things you were describing about the United States, I might be wrong, but it feels like it's a lot about quantitative assessment. And we really need to, I mean, in my opinion, again, my humble opinion here, we need to get away from that, because we cannot quantify success this way. We really need to focus on progress. So it's the qualitative way of assessing the progress of our student that is essential for our future. And that is not only achieved with like you said, like standardized tests. We need other ways to evaluate the creativity of our students with material, hands-on working, active learning, different strategies. And we need to create a lot of different ways of inspiring the kids and to ignite passions, because if we can teach the kids to teach themselves, they become autodidact, for example. It's again another way of learning for life, because they will teach themselves something. The same way I teach myself to play music. I play by ear. I never took the Suzuki method, or I don't read music. But I had this passion, and I just persevered. And I'm not a good musician. I'm average in a lot of different instruments. I mean, I can write music. I love to write lyrics. I love to sing. I love to play guitar, but I'm not like a virtuoso. I can't play a very like a fast solo or something like this. I mean, I get by a little more on drums, for example. But so the key is that I feel that I still make progress nowadays, even if I know that I will spend a few hours practicing. I still feel a satisfaction, because I know that I'm improving. And as soon as you feel that you're improving, you should be rewarded, and you should feel rewarded without having a teacher or someone else tell you how you have become better now. You feel it.
Right. And to be fair, I think America is a very big country, and there's a lot of great things going on here, and they're never reported. So, and we tend to dwell on things and make everything a binary issue of either quantity or quality, right? It's never, and the critics of the qualitative approach, and I have been one, because sometimes qualitative means really shoddy science and and laziness, and getting away with not doing the work. But I know, but what you're talking about is different, because you're talking about other means of having assessment that has efficacy. So in the old days, maybe the very old days, it used to be when you got done with college, you'd have your oral defense, and you'd tell the professors, you'd defend your knowledge. They'd ask you questions, and you
Mhm.
defend yourself, right? And show them your depth of knowledge and your depth of persuasion, and just how it was called the oral defense, right? But
Mhm.
Buckminster Fuller used to say, why don't you just ask kids at the end of let them know, have the kids tell you at the beginning what they want to learn about, right? So they're partners in this, right? And say, okay, at the end of the semester, I'm going to ask you about this subject that you say you're so passionate about, and I want you to persuade me that you learned stuff, right? And
Yep.
then there's something very authentic about that, right? That's almost like pre-test, post-test, but it's tailored to that kid. And so I think there's ways. And a critic could always say, yeah, but what about long division, or what about simplifying fractions? If you just do all that feel good stuff, and they're going to learn all about volcanoes and dinosaurs because that's what they're into, but they're never going to simplify fractions. And you would say what to that?
Well, there's a need for the basic stuff, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, and of course, you need to repeat and you need to practice. There's a great deal of repetition, iteration, and learning. But what you are saying here also is interesting because you're talking about adapting to the student's interest.
Right.
And of course, you have a class, let's say, with 30 students, you're going to have 30 different passions
Mm-hmm.
if they have a passion. But the goal first is to ignite these passions. And if you can adapt your teaching to their interests, I think that goes into this relational pedagogy. Teachers should not like be locked in their office or like eat just with their colleagues at lunch. I mean, you need to spend time and meet the students outside of the classroom also, at the cafeteria, in the corridors, and be available and learn about them outside of the teacher student um, daily interaction. I mean, you're still the teacher there when you have lunch with your students, but maybe like you meet different groups of students like this, but you learn about their own interests, and then you can adapt your teaching according to their interest.
Could you give me an
If you know
example?
that,
Could you give me an example
if you
how?
know, for example, that there's a boy who's struggling with geography,
Mhm.
and then you discover that he's passionate about soccer, or what they call it here, football in Europe.
Mhm.
Um, and then I adapt my geography. If he's got problems with maps, and then I ask him to like make a survey of all these like teams in the Champions League and put them on the map and see which country they represent. So there's Barcelona, Milano, and like all these teams on the map. So then he sees the purpose of knowing the geography of Europe, for
Sure.
example, because it serves a purpose now, that something he can relate to. Or if another student loves horse riding, then when I talk about something, for example, in history, and we talk about Genghis Khan and the Mongols, there I know I can relate, and I can say this is important because they were like able to throw a bow and arrow, riding horses, and you know how difficult it is. So they relate to these things because I've learned about their interest while spending time with them outside of this like classroom situation, where when we have lunch together, then I ask them about their interest, and my
Right.
colleagues do that as well. We call it pedagogical lunch.
Mm.
We have at least 3 times a week. We sit with the students and we interact with them, and we're not like inquisitive. We don't ask them questions all the time about their interest whatsoever, but it comes naturally. And I think this is something important in our school that makes our teaching more sustainable also, because then, like you said, we can adapt, and regardless of what we're teaching, we're able to make links between their personal interests and their needs for knowledge.
Right. And one thing I know about you is I think you had mentioned you had given tribute to one of your teachers, a second grade teacher. Is that correct? Right,
Yes.
and maybe you know from my keynote presentation in Korea last week that I had a second grade teacher too, that is
Yes.
my favorite teacher. And speaking of horses, I'm going to relate this, right?
That's really good.
Yeah, active listening is not my strongest suit, but I am trying. So I was in second grade, and there was a kid, Steve Walker. Oh, Steve Walker. Ugh. And he drew these horses, right? And he drew, like, I called him Wendy the Wonder Horse. They were kind of
Yeah.
like always prancing, and they had the flary mane, and they were kind of noodly, but all the girls loved his horses. They were so like unicorny, kind of stupid. But I was like, but I loved horses. I loved the cowboys, the westerns. I loved the conquistadors. I loved horses. I just loved horses. So my teachers put in front of me Leonardo da Vinci, because I couldn't draw as well as Steve Walker. He goes, well, why don't you look at Leonardo's drawings of horses? And of course, Leonardo would not just draw the whole horse, but he'd draw like the bones and the sinew and the muscles and so I started copying Leonardo. And pretty soon, my horses had bones and muscles, and I would concentrate on the muscles. And when the day came where the kids said that I drew better horses than Steve Walker, I mean, I love Mrs. Libano. Oh my God! But she had launched me on a trajectory of my whole life. It's like that
Yeah.
good, like you're talking about that good feeling. That was such an intense feeling.
Exactly.
I'm still talking about it. It resonates through my entire lifetime. So I've seen it in action. It's happened to me. The teacher had the good sense to see that I was frustrated. I couldn't draw a horse, and she said, "Oh, he's a little Italian kid. I'll give him some Leonardo and see how that works." And oh my God. So yeah, I understand. I get it.
I relate to that so much. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, like that teacher in grade two as well, it was quite the same, but I was, like I said before, I was drawing like um, the Eiffel Tower or the Golden Gate Bridge, and she saw that I had an interest in maybe traveling, but my interest in geography really started there.
Mm-hmm.
And with that goes history. But instead of forcing me to do the same things that the other students, she managed to adapt it for my interest, just like I'm trying to do now with my students. She saw that I was passionate about these places, and then like, can you do a research about this? Can you tell me more about this? Can you draw this in a different place and locate them on a map? So I was learning. I was maybe like a bit outside of the regular curriculum, but she knew that as long as I was making progress, I think I've learned from great teachers, and they all deserve a lot of praise and credit for what they've accomplished. And I think like there's thousands and thousands of outstanding teachers in the world, and they need recognition, all of them. I think we should really make an effort to do something about the status of teachers worldwide, because in my opinion, investing in education is the best investment in the world. This is the one that will bring the best dividends for the whole planet, because it's the next generations that we have to think about. And I encourage people to become teachers, especially those who have been backpacking around the world and they've seen different cultures and they've experienced different things. You have story to tell. You have things to share, and we need good storytellers as teachers, because that's where you really manage to capture the attention of your student, but also you stimulate their imagination and you can ignite more passion. So traveling is I was traveling in my head when I was drawing these things. You were also traveling in your head when you were
Mm-hmm.
drawing all these things, and still today when you're working on this project with Mars, for example. We are dreamers,
Mm-hmm.
but traveling is such a good school, and that's why I encourage these backpackers I see everywhere traveling around
Yeah,
the
and
world
you went on.
to become teachers.
And did you attend college on a cruise ship? Is that right? Or did you, is that at sea?
Uh,
Did you go to sea as a student?
I don't like to call it a cruise ship because it was a floating campus, but
Uh-huh.
yes, it is. It was the SS Universe. It's a cruise ship,
Mm-hmm.
but that was not my first long trip. I took a sabbatical year in 92, 93,
Mm-hmm.
and then my goal was to stay and travel as long as possible with very little, very tight budget.
Mm-hmm.
So I just flew to Europe, to Paris, and then I was trying to find jobs, and I was backpacking, hitchhiking. And in the end, after 11 months, I managed to, I mean, I went all the way to Bangladesh and India and Nepal and Egypt. So I was, uh, I think I've visited 33 countries in 11 months, and I was just 18 years old. I even
And you,
went trekking in the Himalayas with running shoes, totally unprepared. But I was a bit crazy, and I had such a thirst of seeing the world and meeting people and learning from their culture, and it was like I had that need. So that helped me in '95 when I applied, and I was trying to get on the SS Universe of the
right,
University of Pittsburgh,
right.
that floating campus.
That must have been amazing. Was that an international group of students on the boat?
Yeah, we were 400 students on that boat, mostly Americans,
Hmm.
but most foreign students. I don't know why, but we were like a little group of foreign students together. Of course, we were mixing with the Americans as well. But when we were arriving at a port of call, usually they were like we were free to go wherever we want, but sometimes we had some assignments. For example, when we arrived in Vietnam, I had urban geography, so I had an assignment to do about Ho Chi Minh City. And so other students had other assignments to do, but it was such an incredible experience.
Oh, sounds amazing.
So crossing the Pacific Ocean, for example, from Vancouver to Osaka, we had 15 days of like consecutive days of school. So we had like lectures, just like regular classes, just like at university, but even on the weekend, because when we arrive at a port of call, then we had 4 or 5 days sometimes to explore the country, and we had some assignments to do there on site. It was fantastic. On top of that, I had the chance to play music on that ship, and I'm still friends with a lot of alumni of the SS Universe.
It sounds like a really transformative experience. I was going to ask you today, I was like, oh, I should ask him if he was the king of the world, what would be the ideal school he would create? But it sounds like you attended some schooling situations that were kind of ideal. Like you were what we would call in America, we'd say you were a glutton for punishment because you went to university in Mexico. So did you know Spanish before you went, or you just throw yourself into that situation?
That's very little though, but it was only one term, so I didn't
Uh-huh.
like study in Mexico, like because it was an exchange program
Right.
in the summer of '99. And actually the classes I had there required very little Spanish because most of the lectures were in French or in English.
Hmm.
And but I'm I mean, French is my mother tongue, so it's closer to
Right.
Spanish. So I didn't need to take classes really. I learned most of my Spanish in Chile when I was doing research for my master's degree,
Okay.
and that's where I picked it up. But I must say that after almost 20 years in Sweden, Swedish has become dominant now. So my Spanish is suffering a bit, but after a couple of cerveza, sometimes it's coming back. But yeah, it's somewhere on the hard drive. But my Spanish is a bit rusty, I must admit.
Right. Now, coming from America, America is the great melting pot, and I love America. I love my country, and I think that being a good citizen of a country, you should love it for what is lovable about it, but you should also be open to what needs to be improved about it. Right. I think that it
Yep.
doesn't have to be one or the other. It's not binary. When you love somebody, you love them warts and all, but you should also be open fraternal correction, right? You should be open to say, you really should brush your teeth. Your breath stinks, right? So with America, I think, as a former teacher myself, I think that one of the problems is that we tend to be, is as much as we are a melting pot, we're also very provincial. We don't travel like many European children travel. Even within Europe, they had the I forget the name of that program they had. It's named after a philosopher where they could travel all over. The
Erasmus.
Erasmus program, like,
Yeah.
and even we don't even have an Erasmus program for like the continental United States. Like, why doesn't a kid from Arkansas study in Seattle? Like we don't do that. So it seems very, like I said, provincial in a sense, where kids don't oftentimes leave their hometown. I mean, I'm in Galesburg, Illinois, which is 200 miles from Chicago. Many kids in Galesburg have never been to Chicago, let alone St. Louis or
Wow.
Washington. And so this provincialism is odd. And so I think that there's room for improvement there with Americans because for as much of a melting pot we are, we tend to get isolated in this big country. And maybe you could talk to that a little bit.
But I agree, and it's even the case in Canada. Remember when I was 17, there was an exchange program And actually, that's where I really started. I mean, I had no choice but to use English for the first time, really, when I was about 16 or 17.
Mhm.
We had an exchange program with the kids from Calgary, and they were coming to Quebec to learn French, and we went there to learn English. So there was this was happening in Canada, but I can imagine that in United States it's different. But I kind of, if I may, I kind of reacted to this expression melting pot. I've also learned this and read this in history books, but I would argue that the United States is much more like a salad bowl,
Mhm.
because if you look at how many different cultures and subcultures you guys have in this wonderful, great country, each ingredient, like each subculture, keeps its own flavor, really, and they don't really melt into one American identity. You guys are like the cucumbers and the tomatoes and the lettuce, and everything keeps kind of a flavor. And this patriotism that you guys have is like the dressing on top of that, that gives us this kind of this unity. But if you look carefully at your culture and your country, it's much more like a salad bowl than a melting pot, because you have so much diversity and so much difference that you should cherish. So in my book, the melting pot is some type of a cliche, or
Yeah, yeah.
a
It
wish
speaks to
that will
it.
not happen.
It speaks to homogeneity,
Yeah,
and that seems very extreme. And uh, I would only push back in this one sense. I think you're right. I think
yes,
it's actually a compliment that people from Puerto Rico and Guam and the Philippines, and they could all fight together in a war and be Americans and love each
yeah,
other. And that's, or not just fight, but work together, and they're Americans. And America is not
yeah,
a country about race. As much as people would like to say it's a white country, it's really not. And growing up in Chicago, Chicago is tends to be a kind of a racist town. That's what Martin Luther King said. The most racist city he'd ever been to was Chicago. But at the same time, I grew up in Chicago, and my dad was kind of like an Archie Bunker type, World War II generation, fought in World War II. And in Chicago, a common question a child would say to another child is, "What are you? What are you?" And it was not an insulting thing to say or an impolitic thing to say. You could be Polish, you could be German, you could
yeah,
be Italian, you could be Irish. It was just, what are you? And that what you were was not a bad thing or a good thing. It was just what you were. So and then people intermarried. There were Italians who married Polish people, and
yeah,
Irish people who married German people, and that's just the way it was. That's what I think melting pot kind of means, is that
yeah.
you could be,
Becoming American is like
well,
what you mean, like this fusion.
yeah, well, the truth is that the first generation people who come over here, off the boat, we say it's not a boat anymore, but they tend to maintain their language. They used to not teach the children the language, right? And because they kept, the Italians would talk amongst themselves and tell dirty jokes and secrets in Italian, and the kids wouldn't learn it, right? My father spoke Italian. I never learned it. So, but my dad was first generation. I'm second generation. And so what happens is, a lot of times the immigrants think they should push away the old ways, okay, and try to become more Americanized. And because they're afraid they're not going to blend in as much, and to a fault. There was some mistakes made, and I think that now there's by the time you get to the third and fourth generation, people are trying to learn the recipes. They're interviewing their relatives, saying, "What was it like? What did They want to learn, because they feel they know something too much was thrown away, right? So it's a very complex, nuanced thing about the melting pot and becoming an American, integrating too much and trying to hold on to the good things. There's like a conservatism about conserving what's good, and letting go with what I'd call the bad. I'll give you an example. Like in Bosnia, for instance, Bosnia Herzegovina. Bosnians are known for old hatreds, old rivalries, old vendettas, right? Just 500-year-old grievances with their Muslim neighbors, or the Muslims with the Christian neighbors. They have and when we saw the conflict in Bosnia, the murders, the genocide was about very old grievances, right? That disappears when you immigrate to America. And that's good. That stuff should go the hell away. Kids, you should not teach your children about why you should hate Muslims, or why you should hate the Bosnians, or why you should hate the Gypsies or the Jews, right? That stuff should go away. So that's what I mean by that's the good part about America is we tend to have amnesia. We forget our culture and the bad stuff with our culture, but we also forget the good. So I think it's, as a third generation or second generation, it's important to try to keep the good. That's my opinion about the melting pot.
Yeah, I will try to make a parallel with Sweden here, because you talked about like the preserving the language within the family.
Right.
But my first real job as a teacher here in Sweden, even before I could speak Swedish, was home language teacher, it's called, because the Swedish government years ago decided that as an effort to integrate the newcomers to Sweden, one of the best way to do it was to offer the school children some hours of teaching every week in their native language. So, for example, at our school, there's more than 35 different languages because there's a teacher coming from going to different schools. And a kid from Bosnia, for example, can have his classes in his native language. Someone from Somalia, for example. As soon as there's 5 kids in this municipality who share the same native language, the government guarantees that these kids will have a couple of hours a week, or depending on the amount of kids, in their native language. And the result is that these children usually integrate to the Swedish society in a better way just by getting this extra support in their native language. So they speak that language at home. And my own daughters, they're born here in Sweden, but since we speak French at home, my wife and I, they still have these hours in French and extra French. And I mean, you have so many different languages. You have like Cantonese and Mandarin and Japanese. You have even Tigrinya, the language of Eritrea. So it is a way to help integration. And in my book, it works. Of course, there are people who are complaining that it's taxpayer money, that it's not used well, and that people should assimilate. We should all become the same. But I think that the key to success in this, it's integrate, because like you mentioned it so well, is that after a while, these cultures are bringing something new. I mean, the modern Americans are the sum of this hybridization, really. So Sweden is transforming on a daily basis because it is a land, a country that's been integrating people for years. Of course, there are difficulties, like you guys also experience. Like there are like challenges, but when you start to see these challenges as obstacle, that's where people become close-minded and they don't try to find solutions to really make their countries or the world a better place. So we need to see these as challenges that we can overcome, regardless of your culture, regardless of your differences. We need to cherish what we have in common. And that starts in the classroom. It starts in every family, actually. Like in any social unit, you need to be able to find some type of cohesion and cherish the things that brings you together. Right. So this applies to the United States, but it applies to any culture, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's beautifully said. And I remember you told me about how you guys make a real effort to keep everybody in the classroom. People with learning disabilities, different languages, they're all together. Yes. And tell me why that's so important. Why not have a special class for kids with learning disabilities? Why bring them into a class with kids with that are gifted? Why would you do that?
Again, like when I mentioned about like sports psychology, for example, I'm quite against this kind of elitist kind of system. I think in Great Britain they still do that, where you put the best in one class and then the weaker student in another. But by mixing the different levels and by not like labeling kids as talented or less talented from the start, you give a chance to everybody to reach their full potential, because now you are mixing a group of people with different abilities, and you have to cherish these differences, again, just like the ones I mentioned before. We talked about baseball. Would you like to have a baseball team only with relief pitchers?
Well, that would
you wouldn't be. So you need to have people with different skills, different. You need left-handed people. You need a slugger. You need a leadoff hitter who can run and steal bases. You need, just like on a chessboard, players who have different qualities. So if your classroom is like a chessboard and you want to achieve success as a group, each individual is important and each will play a role regardless if you're doing a school project, if you're trying to come up with new inventions, if you use a hands-on material to do a workshop, everybody needs to be included and everybody has different skills. So
Yeah.
you make them feel welcome and needed. And
Right.
that is a pedagogical trick that works all the time.
Yeah. I totally see it. My mind was racing a million miles a minute because for me, and as a kid, as a student and as a teacher, but as a student, one time they rolled out a big piece of paper. It was one of those, you know, those big pieces with the roll, like 3 feet, 4 feet wide, and they rolled the whole floor. They said, we're making a mural for a parent-teacher conference event, right? And so everybody's going to get on your hands and knees and draw, right? I was like, that was like, for me, that was like, eat pizza and ice cream all day. I was like so happy.
Oh, yeah.
So I remember I did a, this is second grade or third grade. And I'm remembering exactly what happened. Exactly. And I don't remember anything else, but so I drew a riverboat, like a Mississippi River riverboat with all the arches and the paddle wheel. And I just said
Steamboat.
a steamboat, exactly.
Yeah,
and I made my number one goal was to make everyone love what I was doing, because that was my opportunity. I wasn't a very good student, but I knew I can kill this, right? So and I did, and people were like, "Oh my God, it's so unbelievable!" It became the center of the picture and everything. But my point is, when you have a diverse group of kids, there might be, for like a cliche, like the Asian boy might be the best mathematician, as a cliche, as a stereotype, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
And then the girls might be good at something else. But if you have like a play they have to do, or they have to act, you might have kids who are the bad kids in the class, the misbehaved kids. They might kill it in comedy, right? Because they're all little comedians anyways, right? The bad kids are like funny. They want to be funny. So you say, okay, you know, the kid is always interrupting me in class. You're going to do the comic bit, and he's going to kill it. And then he had, like you said, he has success in it. The fact is, he killed it, but he was succeeding in your classroom. It didn't matter he was doing comedy. He was succeeding, or she was. I say a boy because usually boys tend to be the ones who are like the little, either a prisoner or a comedian, right? And so, but the fact is, they succeeded in your classroom, right? And that's what's important. They felt good, and that could carry on perhaps to other things, right?
Exactly, yeah. And I must say that, for example, the wonderful pedagogical material that you invented, I had the privilege to try it last Friday with my students. And I noticed from the start that even, like, especially the students who are maybe on the spectrum, they are using this to really think outside the box. And their classmates, they see this and say, oh my God, like, I didn't know that this was possible. So it inspires other kids by just observing, trying to be creative without necessarily trying. They're just like doing it. And I must say that it looks very, very promising for the development of creativity, because sometimes you don't know when you take this. You are the artist here. You were talking about drawing. When you add the art in technology, engineering, science, mathematics, then you add this creative aspect, the creativity we need for problem solving. And I think problem solving is extremely important for the future. We need to have like a youth that understands that, like I said before, there's no obstacle. They're just challenges, and problem solvers will always find creative ways of solving these problems.
Well, thank you for the compliment on my product. I invented it for myself, so I was the frustrated little artist, scientist kid myself. So I'm glad you're finding kids like me. And I probably am on the spectrum a tiny bit, not a lot. But I wanted to say there's a dishonesty we have about the way we present materials. I'm not saying you do this, but when kids are presented with science, it's this compendium of the accumulated knowledge of really smart freaking people, right? And there's a lie to that. It's a lie, because so much of science came about through people who were tinkering and making mistakes and probing and going down false avenues and doing mental exercises like imagining strange thought experiments that seem ridiculous, like into the looking glass down, you know, like a fairy tale. And so much science came about through people who were acted more like magicians and wizards and strange, you know, mixing strange potions. So, but then we present it in this clean book. with people with lab coats, and this is science, and it's all the right answers. And kids get this idea that the teacher is the smart one and they're the stupid one, and there's a test to prove if they know enough science to get by, and that's not science. And so we find out, like, for instance, Buckminster fullerene, the molecule Buckminster fullerene, was recently discovered in the 1990s. And I remember when the book came out, the Scientific American showed a picture of it, and it was a soccer ball, right? And these two professors at University of Texas in, I think it was Austin, they were studying a molecule that had very strange behaviors. And before it was discovered, there was graphite, which is like pencil lead, and there was diamonds, these two forms of pure carbon. Otherwise, carbon was involved in sugar and other kind of molecules. So there was no third form of pure carbon, right? So, but they found this molecule behaving where it had very strange behaviors and was bouncing all over the place. And it seemed to have an atomic weight that made it seem like it might be around 60. So they looked at the number 60 and they said, this seems like a cage structure of some sort. And they theorized, well, if you had a truncated icosahedron, which looks exactly like a soccer ball, it has 60 vertices, which are the plate where the lines come together, the vertices, right? And that's like a geodesic dome. It's like Buckman. So what they did was they cut out pieces of milk cartons in the lab. They're cutting out milk cartons into pentagons and hexagons and gluing them together. These scientists with PhDs are gluing together pieces of paper in like a craft exercise. And then they were writing C and O and H, and they said, oh my gosh, this works with all the different scan, tunneling, microscopes. This seems to, but that's science. That's where you make models and crazy contraptions that try, like the same with the DNA. Watson and Crick, they're building a helix saying this goes with the science. We think that the thing we created actually is what is happening inside of a cell. So getting kids to build things, getting kids to build geometric things that actually mirror the microscopic world is important, because that's what was really happening. So to me, that's a great story. It influenced my life because
it's an excellent story.
Yeah. So anyway,
it's a perfect example of a hands-on experiential learning.
Yes.
So yes, we need to have that again. I mean, even like taking notes with an old-fashioned pen instead of taking notes on a computer. Right. I mean, all the studies show that embodied cognition is essential for long-term memory. So when you do something with your fingers, it's not only that you develop your motor skills, it develops your brain in different pathways, and you learn to think differently, and you learn to think outside the box. And that's what we need for the future. That's people who will find creative solutions. And like you said so well, I agree with you. It's like science is much more just a body of knowledge that is static. It evolves, and we need these. Same thing you mentioned. Also, the engineers go through that. I mean, like people will think that Tesla or Thomas Edison were crazy, and they failed so many times at so many things before they were successful at something. And this is the scientific method, and that's why the students should be encouraged to make mistakes and not be discouraged to when they make a mistake. Nowadays, in the standardized testing system we have, they fear. They don't dare to like push their analysis or try to conceptualize or try to come up with a different interpretation and try to link different things together, because they fear that they will have the wrong answer. And we will tell them that no, that's not right, because this is what we know already.
Right. We're punishing them.
We should not. Yeah.
We're punishing them with success.
Exactly. We want them to do exactly the same way we were taught at school, but that's not what we need nowadays. Yeah. We can't discourage the kids, because we might have a few geniuses there that will be discouraged to really reach their full potential, because they fear of, like you said before, having a bad grade in a maths test, for example, or they don't dare to answer in a dissertation something that might contradict what the teacher wants to hear. But I love to be proven wrong by my students. I love to have an argument with them. I will always reward them. If I make a mistake and they prove me wrong, right, I'm willing to change my mind, because this is how science works. If you provide example, if you provide a proof, this is the empirical method, that tangible proof will force me to adapt their worldview or their understanding of reality because they are using the scientific method, and I'm willing to change my mind when presented with evidence. And I hope that all my students will surpass us in our generation, not only but intellectually at least. So I want them to become successful. Like I said, it's the greatest investment we can make. um, they are they are our hope to save this beautiful planet.
I agree. And I think that I of course you and I are of the same mind. It's like you're my long lost brother from Quebec. It's weird. But but I was going to say two things. I think that Elon Musk is giving us a great example of how you succeed through failure. With rapid iteration, blowing up all his rockets and always learning, they're finding out that that's a way to really make fast innovation and progress. And the counter, the bookend to that would be the space shuttle disaster when it blew up off the launch pad. And it was it took a scientist like one of my favorite scientists, Richard Feynman, who presented to Congress how what happened was that the O-rings in the rockets, it was too cold that morning, and the O-rings got brittle. And the O-rings usually are they're in our cars too. We have O-rings to prevent the gases to escape around the pistons, right? They expand and they stop the gases and the pressures from going down to the crankcase. So when these rockets had O-rings to prevent hot gases from leaking out and like cutting a hole inside the space shuttle or the tank of the fuel tank, right? And he proved by just dipping it in cold water how it became brittle. And that was science. But how come a bureaucracy full of scientists didn't know this? Well, they did know it, but they weren't afraid. They were afraid to trust the science and actually make a mistake. It was a risk-averse culture, and so a risk-averse culture ended up killing astronauts. And Musk was like, I'd rather kill my rockets and learn, so my astronauts go to Mars. So I find that interesting. I just wanted to give you a case in point that I always think about how failure is so important. Now it's part of the culture of a company like Tesla and SpaceX. And but another project I think that you're involved with, though you don't talk about it, is I think that the project you're involved with is a project of civilization in the most broad stroke, right? That you are in this classroom of yours replicating, in a sense, what it's like to live in a civilization. Because you have democracy, you have teamwork, you have the culture, the best that civilization has to offer. I think you're trying to bring to these children so they can feel good about being citizens and compatriots and coworkers and leaders and followers and whatever it's going to be. I used to be a scout leader, and I was a very old-fashioned scout leader. We all wore the Smokey the Bear hats, and we all had hatchets, like the little axes on our belts. And I'd take them to the forest and I'd say, what does this campsite need? And I was lucky enough to have property owners who would let me chop down their trees. I said, what does this campsite need? You know, they said, we need a lookout tower. Ah, lookout tower, an excellent idea. Let's draw what that's going to look like. And then we'd cut down trees and we'd use lashings and build a lookout tower. I mean, nobody got hurt. It's unbelievable. Nobody got hurt. And I said, well, what is this? What else does this campsite need? Well, we need bridges. Oh, bridges are excellent. So we'd cut down trees and make lashings and make bridges. By the time we got done, we had bridges and trail. We cut down trails. It was a beautiful thing, right? And we even made cannons out of potatoes and PVC pipe. We made real cannons. So it was great. And it was like I was saying, what kind of childhood would I like? Well, I'm going to give it to these kids. I'm going to have a little army of boys and girls, and we're going to make a campsite. But in that process, we were like replicating civilization. We were building a little city in the woods. And so I think about that, like, what are we giving to kids as kids that kind of mimic what the adults are doing, right? Because sometimes in school, what's happening in school is an office. And the children are being treated like little clerical workers, and they're given paperwork and paperwork and paperwork, or work on the iPad, and they're treated like little white collar workers when maybe they should be building fires and lighting matches and blowing things up. What's your opinion about this?
I totally agree about you, and like the experiential learning aspect is absolutely essential nowadays. But to go back to your civilization idea, I you understand exactly where I'm going. Not only this, I say, like, there's a way I think that is more efficient to develop this, and it's to take a chronological approach.
Yeah, tell me about that.
If you set everything in some type of timeline, I mean, I have the privilege to work with the same students for a period of 3 years. So during grade 7 and 9, if I start with like for example, prehistory or in geography, like the Big Bang, and I go until today in grade 9, then they know that it will respect a chronological development. And there, when we collaborate together, my colleagues and I, if there is some type of narrative here, we can apply an evolutionary approach to all these developments. Of course, like for example, when we start with prehistory, then we have like that you mentioned technology here, for example, but it's quite hard to like engineer with 40 frame or Lutz blocks a gearbox, for example, if you haven't learned about Mesopotamia and the wheel.
Right.
You don't understand how to build a windmill if you don't understand really how the Egyptians developed the sail for the first time. So you see an evolutionary approach even in technology
Right.
and in the ways of thinking. Like you can't understand the American Revolution really before you understand what comes before that, and
Mhm.
you don't understand the Russian Revolution unless you understand the World War One and how it's interconnected and what happened in the French Revolution too. So there is always this kind of chronology. The way we think today, the way we conceptualize stuff, the way we build motors, the way we distribute electricity, the way we are inventing new ideas, they all have something in the past, and there's nothing that is pure new invention. Everything is part of an evolutionary process. And if you teach this way, it makes more sense to the kids, this kind of civilization, that it is an evolutionary process
Right.
and we're all going towards the future to something new. I mean, I have an aversion for those who are nostalgic of a past that never existed,
Mhm.
those who say things were so better before. I think this is delusional in my book. We need to be forward looking to keep hope and show the kids that despite the odds, despite what's going on in the world, and it's the situation is very serious now, there is still hope that decisive action can lead to rapid improvement. Without this, what are we doing teaching the kids? They need hope. They need to believe that they can play a role and they can change the world for the best. And
Right.
by using an approach like this, that's, in my opinion, a good investment again.
Yeah, I think that telling I think it's okay. I get in trouble sometimes. So I'll say, we mostly kids, us adults mostly don't really know what's going on. We mostly are living in mystery. We
Mhm.
organize our lives so we don't bump our heads and we don't get run over by cars and we don't get killed in freak accidents. But mostly we don't know the nature of reality. We're told that there's black holes and there's neutron stars. We're told these things are real, but it's only a matter of belief that we believe they're real because we trust our scientists. But we really don't know
No, no,
anything.
no, no, no. Wait. I need to stop you here.
Go ahead.
You can't use the word belief in this scientific context.
Right.
Uh,
I
there's
agree.
there's 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 a belief that's a leap of faith, and here black holes, there is tangible proof, and the mathematics is there. I
Right.
mean, we don't
Right.
see them, but they are there. Without it, the whole system will collapse. And I just need to make a parenthesis here. I'm going to have the privilege to be on stage at the Nobel Prize Teacher Conference on the 8th of October,
Right.
together with on stage together with Saul Perlmutter, the guy who won the Nobel Prize because he discovered that the universe is expanding faster and faster and faster the further you go away,
Mm-hmm.
and he used the Doppler effect to explain this, and you can replicate this. It is science. It's something that it's not a matter of belief. You will look, repeat, falsify, you will always get the same result. Of course, there's lots to be discovered. There's a lot of things to be discovered, but it's not a matter of faith. They can provide the proof. You can do the experiment yourself.
Right.
And by using this red shift and this blue shift, you will see that it works.
Right.
So you put your trust in the scientists who
I
are
was just going to
competent
say
in
that
what they're doing.
I was just going to say I put the word trust in. I was just going to say that.
Yes.
I meant
Sorry.
I meant trust, not belief.
No problem.
I was going to
Yes.
say trust. That's what yes. And we do trust
Sorry.
our experts and our scientists. And sometimes the scientists codify a theory when in fact there might be more proof to come that the theory wasn't quite right. And we do know that some things that we thought was the nature of reality shift, right? And
Yeah,
so there's always room
absolutely.
to perfect a theory or an argument. But yeah, that's a good point. And so
That's the whole point of science,
it's a
that
whole,
it's evolving as well, that there's room for improvement all the time.
exactly.
And if a student managed to prove Einstein wrong, he's going to get his own Nobel Prize, and he's
Right.
going to come up with a better explanation, and he's going to improve, or she is going to improve our understanding of reality. Because again, I use the word she here because we really need to encourage more girls to become engineer and scientists, and we need to again, we need worldwide. Now, I'm not talking about what just happened in Afghanistan recently, but we need to empower girls as much as we can as teachers or educators. We're going to need their way of thinking in these problem solving challenges that we have in the future.
And I don't think that's a some of the smartest people I know are women, and Sophia Wood is an example. She her kids use Lux blocks. I've known her for years, and she has a I won't talk too much about her because some secrets I can't let go about her DoD clearances and things, but she's a brilliant coder, engineer, mathematician especially. She's off the chart brilliant, and but I know people at Wolfram, women who are coders that are absolutely brilliant. In the United States, the history of coding is mostly a history of women. A lot of the hard, in fact, the culture was at the time when they had the UNIVAC and make the first machines, the first computers, the men thought, well, the hardware, all the heated tubes and stuff, that's guy stuff. The women, the coding's like secretarial pools. Let the women do that. So in NASA and in buildings, women were doing a lot of the coding. A lot of the coding language comes from women. So we've proven that women, they do more than hold their own with the steam. Sometimes they were in charge. So I'm not worried about women. I think that they have to give the same opportunities to women as boys, and show them their own history. You know, show them women have done this stuff. Madame Curie, she was irradiating herself, discovering, so it's there. It's all there.
Yeah.
So I was going to say something I forgot, but go ahead, finish your thought. You're going to present at the Nobel Prize. Oh, I lost my.
Yeah. On the 8th of October. I think my battery is dying, but I can't see you now.
No, I'm coming back. Don't worry. I'm gonna come back.
I hope my battery is okay. Yeah, I will have the privilege on the 8th of October to present at the Nobel Prize Teacher Conference together with Saul Perlmutter and Åsa Wigforss. So I feel like I'm such a lightweight compared to them. So it's a bit intimidating, but I'll do my best to be clear and concise. And the whole theme of this year's conference is going to be about critical thinking.
Oh, wow. Well, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Well, then that's good. I just trying to get my camera going again. So I guess the idea then is that if the world needs something, it needs to know something about what you've shown in your classroom, besides the stuff you've already said. And you did have the power to like maybe be the head of the UN Education Commission on the Earth, right? What would you see developing nations and even first and second world nations? What can we do as a world community to more rapidly innovate education and get all these disparate countries that are super poor and super rich kind of on an equal playing field? How would you do that? Since I'm going to treat you like the super genius I think you are.
I don't have an already made answer for that, but I'm
looking.
Yeah, it's so difficult because there's so many different realities. I wish I had an answer for that, but I mean, I know that I want to spend a lot of time for the rest of my life in trying to address this question. It is so important that we offer quality education worldwide, regardless of the level of development of the countries. I think that literacy is important, yes, to learn to count, yes, and to learn to make analysis, yes, but there is one thing with the advent of the internet that we really need to focus on, and I mentioned it now, it's to be able to equip the kids with good critical thinking skills. And we teachers need to be able to teach it the right way, worldwide, because it doesn't matter if it's someone in India or in New Zealand or in Chile or in Alaska, they will all be exposed to the information available online now, I mean, with their phones or the computers whatsoever. But we need, and it's as important as literacy nowadays, we need to equip the youth with the skills to be able to identify quality information, reliable sources, what is trustworthy, and not only the things that will confirm pre-existing beliefs. There's too much room for confirmation bias in the world today. People will usually like cherry pick the things that will confirm what they already believe. And there is one thing that I think it's kind of dangerous nowadays, is that we see a lot of people, they imagine that critical thinking is to criticize established science without understanding it. And then they become, no, they don't become skeptics really, they become denialists, because they are like, what is obvious, what is proven, what is demonstrable, that the pen will always, I mean, the law of gravity is a theory, yes, but if you are denying the existence of this force that you can demonstrate time after time after time in these conditions here, you are not a skeptic. So developing critical thinking skills has to be based on the understanding of the scientific method, and you need to have a scientific mindset to understand and to sort out what is good or bad quality information. I mean, I need to make a short parenthesis here, because online today, but it happened like since the dawn of time, but online we can see it like on a hourly basis, or every minute you can see something that is disinformation or misinformation or malinformation. Right. Here on purpose, I don't want to use the word fake news, because it's been overused by disingenuous people for the wrong reason for too long. Disinformation is with the intent of causing harm or to mislead people. And there is so much of this thing online today. And the people are exposed to this, and then they share this believing that it's true. Then it becomes like misinformation, because you don't do it on purpose when it's misinformation. You share something that you believe. But again, like I said, in science, there's no real room for belief. You need to trust those who are in like the experts in that branch. And of course, you need a healthy dose of skepticism, and you shouldn't always buy into all the different science, because we've had throughout history a lot of experience and examples of pseudoscientific stuff that turned out to be just ridiculous. I mean, you mentioned alchemy earlier today,
yeah,
or
spontaneous generation,
even worse, right? Yes, or phrenology, and these things they are debunked.
Yeah, the measuring of the skull, right? Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And
so all of that, we need to teach the kids how to spot what is good and what is bad, the quality of information.
Yeah, and there's a history of progressivism in science that led to Sanger is a great example. You know, the mother of birth control, and a lot of these people were eugenicists. A lot of these people wanted to eradicate or castrate certain sections of society, whether it was gypsies or Jews or blacks. And so that's happened. That's real. And that doesn't mean that their science was wrong. It just means that at the time they thought that there were mongrel races, that there were unfortunate ethnicities that would never become literate or clean, or they were maybe polluting the clean genetic pools, right? And these were all well-intentioned Christian folk, but they seemed to our eyes, had very evil ideas, right? And it turned into like genocides. And we still see it today. Yeah. We still see people who look exactly like the Bosnians, for instance, who they live across a river from each other, but they think the other people that are ethnically identical to them are not worthy of existence. And so I totally agree with you. I think that science is in a great respect our savior, but technology and science are also benign, and they could be used for very evil things too. So, but it's like anything. Power is power. Power could be used for good or evil, but it is power, and it also, like you said, the truth is the truth, and the truth. I think as a teacher, I was thinking about this before we got on air. I was thinking about one of the things you have to teach the kids, I guess, or reason with them is that the power to be educated is the power to know the difference between right and wrong, of true and untrue. And couldn't you get most kids to agree that they want to know what's true and what's not true? And that's again, that project civilization is a culture that knows how to do that will progress.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on there. And I think that not only the children, I think everybody is seeking the truth.
Right.
And we have different ways of seeking the truth. And there are like worldviews that can coexist. But in the end, it's not only science itself, it's a scientific mindset, it's a scientific approach. Even I'm not a scientist myself, but as a historian, for example, we employ the scientific method to investigate the past. Yes, our vision, like our view of the past is still blurry, but every time we make a new discovery, we evaluate the quality of these artifacts, of these bones, of these documents, for example. Is it good? Is it reliable? So the clearer our picture gets, the better we will understand what happened to us in the past. And nowadays we're so lucky with DNA, and so a lot of things that we thought we knew are either confirmed or we understand in more like details how complex it is. If you look at paleontology today, it's amazing. So many discoveries, and it's extremely fascinating to see like new discoveries about our origins. I think it's so inspiring.
I remember in my same second grade classroom, we had show and tell, and I had a book, and I'll never forget this because I had my great successes in school in second grade, my great failures in second grade. One of my great failures, which was a spectacular failure, I had found a picture in my dinosaur book of a very early fossil of a fish, and the fish looked like it had a very stony kind of crustaceous kind of shell on the front of it, right? And what I said to the class was, I said, this species of so-and-so is an example of a creature that is both half rock and half animal. This is the missing link between mineral and animal, right? And so my teacher's looking at me and she's like, I don't think that's how it works. I was convinced that this was an example of something that's rock and animal. And to my,
you had a fertile imagination.
Yeah, in my second grade imagination, I thought I was being a great scientist. And maybe if I lived 1,000 years ago, I would have basically written the new law, right? Because it was kind of like spontaneous generation. Like there's mud and then there's eels, there's rags and there's mice. That was like there's rocks and there's this creature that looks like a fish, but it's part rock. So, but my teacher had to very gently say, Michael, that's an interesting theory, but that's not how evolution works, right? So, but but sometimes we remember those spectacular, crash landing failures, and I never forgot that. I was like, wow, it's a great idea, but so wrong,
But you learn from that.
Oh my God!
Actually, I think we still need a lot of room for imagination and fantasy, and you could have written a story about this, and it's so why not? I mean,
well, just imagine if you were a kid and you said to your teacher whenever you were in school and a little kid, and you said, I think that the dinosaurs had feathers, teacher. And she would have said, you're such an idiot, Philippe. Everyone knows that dinosaurs are green with leathery skin. What would you think they have feathers? Well, I think the dinosaurs look like birds. I think that why wouldn't dinosaurs have feathers too? Because it looks to me like a velociraptor is like an ostrich. And Philippe, you're such an idiot, Philippe, right? But now we think that maybe dinosaurs had feathers, right? So it's
not maybe, it is proven now. And I mean, they all lay eggs, and they are like, no, they are overwhelming proof now that they are related.
Right.
And
but you can talk about courage.
This evolves. Yeah, exactly. It evolves, and we are making new discoveries now. Now we have more clues about what we're about to discover, because we know in DNA, for example, in a human genome project or in the Neanderthal genome project, there are like these what we used to call the missing links. We know that we should be able to find them somewhere, but there are some environments that are too humid to preserve these types of bones, where these, for example, ancestors used to be. But now that we have a clearer and clearer picture of this is how science works. And again, like I said before, I don't think there's any room for a leap of faith there. We need to provide evidence, and we need to teach the kids to ask for evidence, because extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Just that's
Right.
a quote from Carl Sagan.
Right.
Um, so we need to really make sure that uh, we safeguard the next generation from this disinformation, from charlatans, and from disingenuous people who are trying to fool us
Right.
in believing things that are potentially harmful for us.
I agree. You know, speaking, and I don't mean to change the subject, but speaking of Carl Sagan, you either wrote or performed a song about Carl Sagan because
Well,
you,
it's mostly an interlude, yes.
yeah, yeah. Well, you were in a band called Atlas Volt. I was gonna say Atlas
Yes.
Shrugged, but it wasn't Atlas Shrugged. Atlas Volt, and then you were at a different band called, was it Omes more
Oh,
recently?
mess, yes.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
tell us about how, because I think this probably, maybe not, but I think that this latent artistic side of you that's not so latent, where you're a crooning, you know, you have this, and you have a pretty high voice. You have your rock voice is kind of high, but and I think that I heard your music, and it reminded me of I thought it'd be really just hardcore, like, but it was more like ELO, kind of like Project Rock, alt rock, a kind of a beautiful synthesis of beautiful sounds, poetic messages, and then you collaborate with some amazing videographers and
Yeah.
filmmakers. Tell us about how you started Atlas Volt, because if you guys are listening to this podcast, you got to check out Atlas Volt because it's just fantastic. So tell me about how that happened.
Well, yeah, Atlas Vault is it's a duo actually. We're just two.
Mm-hmm.
It's Adam Hansen Chambers, a good friend of mine from Great Britain, that I met when he was living here in Sweden. He was an immigrant like me, and we started to collaborate on different songs, and then we made an EP. And then Adam had to move to Great Britain again to take care of his dad who got sick. And nowadays he lives in Australia, but we're still in touch, and we managed to, like, it's more a studio project. We're not like touring or doing live shows. We just wanted to write songs together. Um, with my lyrics, I am the lead singer. Adam is playing electric guitar and bass, and then we realized very soon that both of us could play all the instruments we need. So we said, like, let's try to be like a symphonic orchestra of two. But we record overdubs. We play, like, we record with a Logic Pro, a program, so I can, like, even make my own vocal harmonies. Uh, and like you said, it's very eclectic. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have like again, like I said, I'm not a big fan of labels, but it's mostly prog rock, like kind of like, I like narratives again. I mean, I like the Memento Mori album is an album that people should listen from start to finish. It's 74-minute long, but there is a narrative, there's a story in there, and the music changes, the mood change with the different lyrics. But this collaboration I have with Adam was extremely inspiring because we didn't have any boundaries to our creativity in this project because we were independent, unsigned, and we were doing the music we liked. And we, like you said, you mentioned the aesthetics also, like the artwork and the collaboration we've had with other musicians sometimes. But we really made the music we wanted. We were not like forced by a record company to do a 3-minute song whatsoever. We have some songs that are over 8 minutes, and some interludes like the one you mentioned. So that freedom, that artistic freedom, is what I needed as a hobby. Because art, like I said, you're also an artist, you understand. I mean, you need to set your mind free, and to be creative. You cannot have the boundaries of like the industry. However, during when we had our first EP, one of our song was because there is a radio show on the weekend in Sweden called P3 Star, and they only play the music of the unsigned artists, those who are not member, like, or they're not like in a record or signed by a record company. And in 2013, our the first song we ever wrote, ended up being #1. That was kind of unbelievable.
And that's the
So
only song I couldn't find on YouTube because you have a blocker. You have to pay for it. I couldn't find that song on YouTube because you have to be a paid subscriber to listen to this song. Because I listened to a lot from Memento and Memento Mori, but that song. Tell us about that song because that was a chart topper, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because it's the first song I wrote when I really started to play music again. Because in the early 2000s, I was producing techno music with other friends, mostly trance, progressive trance music. So with some, yeah, again, I love everything that is eclectic. I love to mix different styles. So that techno music kind of, I learned to use these programs, but then I went back to my love of analog instruments. So I picked up the guitar again and the drums, and so so that song, I remember I wrote it in my kitchen pretty quickly. I was trying to make an indie folk song for my newborn daughter,
Hmm.
and my wife was pregnant with my second kid, and I wanted to just write simple lyrics, message to them. And again, like you see that theme, memento mori. Like, I don't know if it happened to you, but when I became a dad, I started to have some morbid idea that what will happen to them if I die tomorrow.
Hmm.
So I wanted to leave some type of legacy for them as soon as possible. That what is the essential message I want to give to my two daughters. And that was like that song called Shine Your Own Light. Very simple text, unpretentious indie folk, not, more like indie pop now, because the way we kind of arrange it turned more indie pop. Uh, so that's a song I hope they will listen to when I'm gone, and they will remember me. And that's the main advice I want to give them. So that the whole and the lyrics of the song are some type of legacy to them. And not only for my daughters, for the youth of the world. If people will find meaning in, and their own meaning in the lyrics of the songs I wrote. And I think that's why Atlas Vault music is I need this. It's my, yeah, it's my main hobby. And I think that I have never dreamt of becoming like a rock star whatsoever, but it's such a good way to express my creativity in my hobby.
Right. I was thinking about you, and I'm thinking about the migration of like the noble spirit of a man, right? And you know, being on a baseball team as a kid, that's a certain level of maturity, and you know, and then, but we're all driven by a kind of noble cause or a noble reason, right? And so,
Mm.
winning, helping your team win is noble, and that's you're
Yeah.
playing, you're giving it all, your all, because you don't want to let your teammates down, and that could be transcribed to war too. Most soldiers will say, "I wasn't fighting for Germany, or I wasn't fighting for America." At some point, you're fighting for your fellow soldier. You're just trying to stay alive, and that's a documented sociological case study, right?
Absolutely.
But so as I look at your career, I'm like, oh, there's a migration of I think of you, the Vitruvian man, right? You know, Leonardo's guy in the box, right? Except you don't know hair, right? But so, but I was thinking about you as like, well, think about Philippe Longchamps as the Vitruvian man, like the man progressing, and then at some point in time, you're doing research on Chilean dictators, and you're doing the thing. But at a certain point, and then you're a rock and roller. But then you marry this beautiful Swedish woman, which was a good move, and then you start to have kids, and you're a rock and roller, but also you are become a teacher. And the noble project for you then is you're thinking about your own mortality, like you just mentioned, which I think is a huge, and I think having children is a marker of a new level of maturity. It's a new passing through to something else that men that don't have children can't understand. And then also teaching children puts the pressure on you to think about not only your own mortality, right, but you're passing on, transmitting, so like we talked about, civilization, society, values, science, these projects of civilization. So yeah, and I think there's probably more to your evolution if you live longer. There'll be another stage. Maybe you'll be reflective and write autobiography. But you did just recently write a book with Charlotte Graham, who was she the organist in OMS? Did I see that right?
Yeah, she plays the organ
Yeah,
actually.
I
Good
saw
call.
that.
Yeah.
I did a little.
Yeah.
I did a little homework. You know, I hate homework. I did.
She was a music teacher from the beginning,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah,
Yeah.
and she's a
Yeah.
beautiful woman, and and you just co-wrote a book with her. You want to tell us about this new project now? You've wrote a book. What does the book say?
Well, right now with the working title, I mean, we started to write that book. It's called Sustainable and Integrative Active Learning.
Mm,
But right now we're trying to find something a bit catchier. Big scoop here. It's going to be published by Routledge. So
mhm.
great publisher from Oxford in Great Britain. So
Awesome.
worldwide distribution. And right now we are looking for a catchier title, and it's probably going to be transformative education.
Hmm.
But it's a brick. I mean, we are two workaholics, and we work on that book like crazy. We also co-wrote a chapter for another upcoming book that's coming out on the 21st of October, called Creativity Think Tank. That was, I mean, the idea of Leonard Summer in Stuttgart in Germany, and that book will be launched worldwide in different regions.
How did you pitch the book? What's your elevator pitch that got these people to publish your book? Why would anybody want to read this book? How's it going to change or affect anybody?
Well, I think there's a lot of books that tell teachers what they should do, and I think we are writing a book here where we provide a lot of examples of how to do it and the why to do it. And also, like, we are looking at perspective for the future. And from our like experience as music teacher, and Charlotte is also a school principal now. And my experience as, like I said before, a home language teacher and teacher for many years in different subjects at different levels, we are trying to take inspiration in what we have done, our success and our failures, and provide, like I said, a lot of practical examples. And also, mostly, like it says in the title, it's integrative, but also the key is collaboration. Like I said before, we are providing ideas on how colleagues within a team can collaborate to integrate their subjects to provide a more sustainable learning experience for the kids, something that is more like lifelong learning. So again, it's like I said, it's a huge book, and we are really proud that it's coming out soon. And on top of that, we had the privilege to produce a series of webinars for school principals in China this summer. And so all these ventures, and the fact that now we're going to eventually receive royalties for this book, led us to start our own startup company. So now another scoop here for you. First time we're going to mention it. We have launched a company called Integrate Teach. And right now, I mean, we don't know what it's going to become in the future, but right now we are like on track of publishing these books. We wrote a few articles together, and again, we have other people helping us.
So is
contributing, and we have a. Yes.
Is it a publishing company? What's Integrate Teach? What's it do?
Well, as of now, we are receiving payment from for these webinars that we made this year. So we needed to start the company in order to have like a company account to receive this payment, and now the royalties of the book. So, but eventually, hopefully, maybe in the future, work in consultancy, provide also training for teachers. And you mentioned how do we share best practices worldwide? How do we manage to help developing countries to really reach a higher standard in their own education system, and how to improve the curriculums everywhere. I mean, there's a lot of policymakers that have good intention, but they don't have the experience of teaching in a classroom. And I think that I need more experience in this branch before I jump in this business. But the company Integrate Teach will be running in the background, and the day I feel that I am ready to offer my service to contribute to the betterment of education worldwide, then I will probably be able to channel this through this company.
So you're kind of like, you're like you want to be like the Elon Musk of education, kind of, don't you?
Maybe, but I won't build big rockets that cost millions.
Well, but the idea that you the answer to my other question was, if I made you the head of the UN and you were the king of the world, the answer was basically me. Like you're trying to create a business that's kind of answers that question, or it gives people a way forward, right?
Exactly, but also promote these ideas that we've talked about today. Also, the idea that we need more hands-on learning, more sustainable learning, things that are leading to lifelong learning. And it does not only apply to kids at school. If
Mm-mm.
we make this a habit, like we talked about this, and it's your case as well, we will never stop learning. And if we make this a habit, and we are like teaching the kids to teach themselves, this isn't a winning formula,
It
because
is.
people will always continue to learn and things will develop. Even when
No.
you're retired, you're still learning stuff, and you still go
Yeah.
take classes here and there. And so it's so important to ignite passions.
Yeah. I think we're on the precipice of the greatest success in human history. I really believe that. I think it's a powder keg in the best sense of the word. We're about to explode. It's going to make the Enlightenment and the Renaissance look like a cave, because all the tools, the exquisite tools, are now available for the most part. Digitally, we have everything that's ever been learned pretty much is available at the speed of light with the new satellites that Elon Musk just put up there to anywhere on the globe. So the knowledge is there. And what's missing maybe is just the right teaching approach. But I think we're on the precipice of activating billions of human minds to achieve their potential. And there's an emergent order that comes out of that no one can predict. It's better. It's way bigger than AI. By magnitude, it's bigger than AI. And you are like, you've got the match in the powder keg. I think that this is what's happening. Like, it's about to blow up. I really believe that, and I think that I'm a big fan of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. I think that we're at a completely new precipice of a new age. I don't know what the age is called, but I have, because of my job, I work in material science with my block and stuff. I know what's going on in terms of how we fabricate things, what's happening very small with metamaterials and biomimicry.
Yeah.
There is so much going on in the universities right now that most people don't even know about. It's about to just explode. That not just the advancement in technology, but I think that once we activate this, and I know it sounds corny, but I think we're going to have a new renaissance, a new kind of renaissance.
I really, really hope you're right. I think, I mean, I
Well,
feel
I
it
am
coming
right.
as
No,
well.
you don't have to worry about it, because
Yeah.
I am right. So
Good.
just believe.
Like
No,
I said,
trust what I say.
yes, trust is good. And for this, we need to keep hope, and we need to be realistic about like this hope. There is an urgency for hope, because we really need to take what's going on in the world seriously, and that realize, and also teach the kids that whatever happens around the world will have an impact on their lives. Whatever happened on the surface of this beautiful planet, or like you mentioned, the satellites, or even above their heads or under the ground, everything is interconnected. We are sharing. We're brothers and sisters on a
Yeah,
speck of dust in
yeah,
the universe, and we need to be able to really keep hope that we are able together to find the solutions
yeah,
to the big questions and the big problems.
and it's their world. I think that the idea, I mean, I believe that there is a place for nations, but then again, I think there's a place where nations get in the way, where the metaphor has to change somehow. We have nations and borders for a reason, I understand, and airports and security guards. There's reasons for all this, but the metaphor has to change. And the idea of Erasmus, the idea of the boat ship on, I think that the idea of having a fleet of ships with schools on them, maybe an armada of ships that are constantly going around the ocean, and we should fly children around the world, and we need to get an international global project where we treat the children like they're all human beings. And I know it sounds corny and liberal, but we need to really emphasize that this human project is the most important thing, like you were saying, and use this NASA kind of high-tech thinking to make this happen faster than ever before. Get the Bill Gates and the Elon Musk on board with this project of kids should see the ocean. Kids should walk in a lagoon. Kids should walk on a mountain and see a volcano. This should be their world, and we should make sure they feel like it's their world and experience it, not just digitally, but let's get them traveling, at least in their teenage years, get them traveling around the world. Because just think how much you grew as a person when you were in the Himalayas as an 18-year-old and walking around in Marrakesh or wherever the hell you were. You said you were everywhere. But that's usually we think of only rich kids can do things like that. You know, the uber wealthy could go to the Mediterranean, to the Himalayas. But wouldn't it be wonderful if any kid had the opportunity to do that, right? I'll say
it would be great if they could all travel, and it would be even greater if we could, within the next few decades to be able to achieve this without using any fossil fuel to do that. So that would be even greater. Um, I mean, I'm aware that traveling around the world on a ship and flying people around the world, and I have had the privilege to travel a lot, but there is a cost to this. When I say that we need to keep hope, we need to take our responsibilities as well. And we all have to make an effort to improve this, and that can come with some technological advancement, but there's not only one solution to this. We need hundreds and
Yeah,
thousands of
it's a it's a
solutions.
it's a logistics problem. I think it's a logistics problem.
Yep.
I think we have lots of planes that sit dormant a lot of times. We have a lot of electrical grids that are not being used. I mean, the world, when you play the world game, Buckminster Fuller talked about world game. When you think of the world as a whole system, right? And there's these children all over the world. You don't think of them as American children or Bangladeshi children or Ukrainian children, but they're just children, right? Okay, so here's the World Bank of children. So how can we get this bank to migrate around the globe and have these different kind of wonderful experiences? What do we need? Well, we need airplanes and trains, right? And boats. Okay, well, we have those. So I think it's a logistics problem. I don't think it's even that hard a logistics problem. We send relief to countries all the time with big planes. And I don't think it's really that probably in the great sum of things, a big carbon footprint to move kids around to study. I think that much more is wasted on silly things like tourism than important things like, the future of humanity.
Good point. Yes. But one great thing also is that imagine like the chance we have today. You are somewhere in the heart of the United States in Illinois, and I'm here in southern Sweden, and we are talking to each other
Right.
live right now.
Exactly.
It's incredible the type of friendship that technology makes possible. 20 years ago, when I moved to Sweden, that would have been unimaginable. And we're so lucky in a way to live in a time like this.
Well, I agree. It's funny because I used to think I was a Pollyanna. Like I think everything is positive and whoopee goo, but I think that I am very hopeful. I think that we're right at the beginning of something really special. And I think if you tell kids that, say, you guys are lucky in this way, you're going to see, just think of a child who is like my father. He was born in 1919, okay? So his normal growing up was radically different than a kid growing up in the 60s, right? As a kid growing up in the 1850s. And now these kids are being born in a world where their normal is, life is, it's like the majority of their social life is digital, for instance. You and I are too old to conceive of that our personality is that little cartoon online and that most of their interactions is digital. Now, you and I probably agree that probably is not good for them, that they shouldn't be living a digital life, but that's their normal, and we're doing that right now. We're being digital right now. But so I think that the normal for the future kids might be something completely different, and I want to give one more example of an artist who was one of the greatest scientists, and that was I'm a big fan of a guy named Ernst Haeckel. Do you know about Ernst Haeckel?
No, never heard of him.
You've seen his stuff. He's kind of like the Audubon of the very small. Remember Audubon drew the birds? Ernst Haeckel wanted to be an artist in the 1800s, and he was English, even though his name was Haeckel. It sounds German, but he was English. And he went to Italy and he was painting watercolors in Italy. And but he was also interested in microscopic life, microbial life, sea life. So he started to get samples from algae in these lagoons in Naples, and he was drawing through a microscope. He was the first person to really make beautiful drawings and paintings of these protozoa and these microscopic organisms. And when the boat, the Challenger, was sent around the world, the first worldwide expedition to take sea life samples from all over the globe, they brought it back. I think it was Oxford University. I think it was Oxford. And they had this great collection, but they didn't know what to do with it because they had samples of algae from all over the oceans of the world. And they said, what are we going to do with it? They said, why don't you have that one artist guy, Haeckel? Just give him all those samples, let him look through the microscope and make drawings of them. He discovered 5,000 species of radiolariae, which is pond scum essentially, but they're all little geodesic domes or little spherical structures like cathedrals, like 3-dimensional or 4-dimensional cathedrals, right? And if you just Google him, it's unbelievable. So he was a naturalist, artist, great artist, but naturalist, scientist, right? And he was a great inspiration for me because that was my instinct too, was to draw detailed drawings of natural things and see the structure in them, right? So I think our idea of what a scientist should be or an engineer should be radically frustrated. It should be disrupted, because I think to activate the whole mind, we have to knock ourselves in the head and say it's not just about scientists and artists. That there are sci artists, there are
Yep.
musicians that are also good at building things, or dancers that could also weave. We have to really open our minds to the fact that the human brain is complicated. And I think you're doing that with your classroom by integrating these approaches and doing historical perspectives and having different types of kids all being forced into the same room. I think that you are on the right track. That's why I wanted to interview you, because I think the future kind of looks like this bald guy from Sweden.
Thanks. I mean, I agree with what you just said. Now, I mean, like I said, this artist is an example.
Mhm.
But there's one thing I would like to discuss also, is that I recently watched your wonderful talk with Chris Brownell, and I mean, you blew my mind. It was so good. And there was a thing about the Suzuki method and the 10,000 hour practice, and it's super interesting. But I recently read a book. You need to read it, from David Epstein, and the guy who wrote that book about the 10,000 hour practice, Malcolm Gladwell.
Mhm.
After a debate and after reading Epstein's book, he said that he was like he thoroughly enjoyed being proven wrong about his 10,000 hour theory, because that guy, David Epstein, wrote a book called Range, and that's a bit what you were describing now. Is that
Range with an N, range? Mhm.
range,
Yeah.
like large range,
Like home on the range.
and
Yeah.
yeah, to have like a broader
Yeah.
range.
Mhm.
And it's outstanding. It's very, very good. First of all, the idea of specializing too early, of spending a lot of time doing the same repetition, same thing. Of course, we need to practice and repeat different things, especially for musicians or artists or dancers.
Mhm.
But the idea is that when they're too young and we force the kids to specialize too early in doing the same thing again and again and again, with the goal of becoming the best in that branch, is probably not the best thing to do for the overall development of the individuals. The idea is to, like we mentioned from the beginning, I think that suits me better. This idea of range, of becoming a little bit above average in a lot of different things, and try to become, like you mentioned, the Renaissance man, the polymath, who has knowledge in a lot of different things instead of specializing too early into something. And in this
Yeah.
book, it's very interesting, because from the start, he says that the world needs more Roger Federer, who are good at a lot of different things. And he could have become a champion in a lot of different sports, but he decided on tennis very late in his life. Could have become a surgeon, he could have been a scientist, because he had like a really wide range of interests before he started to specialize at the age of 16, 17.
Mm.
In contrast, you have a Tiger Woods at the age of 2. He was only focusing on golf, the same thing again, like every day. And in the end, now that his career is over, he is quite unidimensional. And is he happier? So the question is, like, what are we trying to aim at right now? Like, to have like highly specialized kids, or we want to have kids with much broader perspective, more polymaths, more people who have decent levels in a lot of different
Right.
skills.
And I would argue for that. To be
Mhm.
fair to Suzuki, who I think was the roommate of Einstein when he was traveling
Yeah.
to Switzerland before he did his Suzuki method. Suzuki was born in and worked in Nagasaki, which we know what happened in Nagasaki. And he tried to teach his nephew, his niece, how to play violin. And when he was teaching her violin was too big. It was an adult violin. So he invented the different sizes of violin and cellos, right? And then he put a method around that. And he called it, his method was called, in Japanese, I forget the word, but it translated as the mother tongue method. That the way the child learns language is through the mother's voice, mostly, especially in Japanese culture. And so, because the Japanese mother raised the child. So the idea was that you should treat education like a mother tongue method, right? So uh, the mother would listen to the music, and they were playing Bach and Beethoven and Brahms and Mozart and Vivaldi. And so the idea was instilling beauty, and this is actually a very Japanese idea too, that to surround your world with beautiful things is very Japanese. They love beauty. So
The aesthetics
so
is so
I didn't want
important.
I didn't want the baby to go out the bathwater on your idea of Suzuki's not really about the 10,000 hours. It's the Suzuki method, to defend it a little bit because my boys were raised in Suzuki, is to basically achieve something with violin or cello that's very difficult. And if the child starts late, it's very hard to do. And that's to achieve tone. Tone is very hard with violin. The Oompa Loompa band, like the German type of band, brass band, lots of elementary schools could do bands because you need a very small level of proficiency to blow a trumpet or to play an oboe to have a kind of, to make some music, right? Even it won't sound great, but it won't sound like a first-year violinist, which sounds really like a cat dying. It's horrible. Okay, very hard to achieve tone on a non-fretted instrument. Like frets are like there's frets on a guitar, right? So you press the string, the fret makes the perfect bridge between the tonal length of the chord, right? But the fat little finger of a child, right, has to just be perfect every time. Otherwise, it's like. So that's what Suzuki was aiming at, was to train the ear in a loving way by hearing beautiful sounds, which was basically Mozart and Brahms and Beethoven, right? And to instill in them a sense of the love of beauty and the sound of beauty. But I don't think it was an example of hyper-specializing children. But I do see, especially in Asian culture, but here too, where we try to force down lower and lower to now even in the kindergarten level, we're teaching kids to take standardized tests in math and reading. Oh my God. Froebel and Montessori would be rolling in their graves if they thought that their kindergartens, Montessori's were being used to teach standardized tests of reading and math proficiency. Oh my God. That's a cardinal sin of these progressive educational innovators, right? So, and you know me, I'm a big believer in Froebel and the method of having kids have these different manipulatives in their hands. So, so that's my take on that. I just want to defend Suzuki a little bit because he was really trying to do a very loving method. And I don't think it's an example necessarily of hyper specialization at a young age.
No.
So
exactly.
I'm pushing back a little bit.
It's a method that works.
It does have efficacy. It does it, and it does have its problems. And Suzuki people will tell you that there are good Suzuki teachers and there are like robotic Suzuki. And you told me the same in Montessori. You have robotic Montessori teachers that believe that something must be made out of wood to give to a child. It can't be plastic. And that's kind of, it's a 200-year-old theory of Montessori. And so obviously it must evolve too with time.
Of course.
So anyway,
with the new technology as well. And by the way, I didn't mean to be mean to a person like Tiger Woods that's saying that it's bad to specialize. I mean, he's an outstanding golf player, but our best bet for the future is probably to try to find this balance between like hyper specialization, to try to have a broader range of people who have developed decent skills in a lot of different things. But one of the most important one is critical thinking skills and understanding the scientific method as important as literacy and numeracy.
And understanding how geniuses work. Like Einstein's an example of your case in point, where Einstein, if he said, when I want to have a really great idea, I don't think like I need to think of a great idea. He'd play crappy violin because he wasn't a great violinist, but he enjoyed playing. He played okay, but he'd play violin and forget about it, and the ideas would come. Ray Kurzweil, the head engineer at Google, said that if I really need to solve a hard problem, right, I don't try to solve it. I go to bed without trying to solve it. And at 3 a.m, I wake up and I start writing shit down because I'm in the middle stage between being awake and being asleep. He learned how to use his brain. And ideas are like more plastic and like in a cloud. And the solution comes to him because he doesn't have the resistive state of being awake, where he's like being judgmental to all his thoughts. And it's kind of like a little fluid, kind of dream-like thought process. And he says, and I come up with my best thoughts in that state. And I think a lot of great thinkers have said that there's a twilight of thought and imagination that it's very fertile for great ideas. So again, we could teach it to children. There used to be a thing, and in my interview with Kirby Erner, he talked about there used to be a practice in the past where you'd use your imagination to compartmentalize knowledge. And you'd have like a visual architecture, and you could imagine like over here are the ideas for this, and over here I think about cats, and you could like have an architecture of your mind. How astounding that is! And I was never taught that as a kid, but I wish I was, because that's pretty neat.
It's mind maps are great.
Mind mapping,
and that goes back to what I was saying about this chronological approach.
Yeah.
when you add a chronology to your mind map, you see an evolutionary process, these branches who are developing in your thought process. And if we can teach the kids to see their learning this way as an evolutionary, like a tree who's growing different branches, that provides range, and that provides also, we will probably be able to inspire them or at least ignite a passion, so be they can have a thirst for learning more about the things they're interested in, and there they can specialize and become the best they can be in a specific thing. But again, to live a full life, I think we should strive towards uh, try to become a bit more multifaceted and versatile in our uh, interests and also like our habits.
I agree. I think it's actually what our body and our mind wants to do. I think that most
Yep.
people, we see there was a kind of thing where like, oh, you don't want to be a dilettante and be like crappy at a lot of things, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about
No.
having loving hobby pursuits that are make us a dilettante in the best sense of the word. We're just a curious person, and we're like we're fulfilling our curiosities. It doesn't mean like we're mediocre. We might be mediocre in lots of things, but being mediocre in physics is a lot better than believing the world is flat, right? Or being a science illiterate. It's like there's nothing wrong, and most people know that they want to go buy Martin Gladwell's book and buy a book about Richard Feynman. They want to know how great thinkers think. People naturally are curious, and you're saying that could be there's the art of teaching is to nurture that curious human, right? Which is a natural state, anyways. Well,
I think it's the main role of the teacher. Yes.
Where can people buy your new book? Is it being published yet? Is it out?
No, it's coming out very soon, but we'll keep you posted. It's going to be distributed by Routledge worldwide. And the 21st of October, the Creativity Think Tank book is coming out, the one that Leonard Summer is right now like printing. And we'll post all the information on the new Integrity website very soon.
Well, will you come back when the book comes out so we can talk about it?
I would love to.
I love you too. I put behind me. I thought about you because I'm an American, so we have very cliched, narrow ideas of everybody. And with Americans, with smart French people, you're either the good guy like Truffaut in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where he's like "écoutez," or
watch out! I speak French. I'm not French. I'm
well, no,
Canadian.
To me, Quebecois are Frenchies. So, and then I thought about Belloc. Remember Belloc from Raiders of the Lost Ark? Belloc. That was like that's a bad French guy, and so with the pith helmet. So I got my Mickey Mouse guy here. Hold on, I'll show you.
Okay.
Oh no. There's Mickey Mouse, pith helmet with the binoculars. So yeah, so that's me, Mickey Mouse with the pith helmet and binoculars.
And you made the helmet with Luke's blocks.
I did. Yeah, but I love the pith helmet, and I think it's a symbol of civilization, good and bad. Dr. Livingston. But the idea of I thought the ideal school would be to get on a boat with some kids and some big fish nets and pith helmets and and journals and go and do a naturalistic expedition and take samples to bring back to the village and put the butterflies. It's cruel, I know. Put them on the wax and to have the frogs in the jars and say, look at all the flora and fauna in our neighborhood. And have kids replicate what science has done, right? And I think it's just, I think we need to really go back to like, let the kids dig in the forest and find examples of what's going on. I think, how could you go wrong with that,
This is also a part of experiential learning. I mean, to go on field trips, it's essential to learn about your environment and the environment with a capital E.
Yeah, I think that I think it's getting better now, but I think in the 20th century, children were divorced from nature. Urban living and even suburban living, kids weren't really getting their fingernails dirty. Farming became a very strange thing. In the state of Illinois, where I live, I just went to the state fair, and it was like the difference between agrarian culture in Illinois and urban living is like difference between Wales and Paris. It was like a different country. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe these kids with their prize cows walking around, These children were calm. They were mannerly, right? They seemed self-possessed, right? They weren't nervous. And I saw then there was other kids who came in from the suburbs and the cities that were digital gamers, and they're there to play digital video games competitively. Not that they weren't nice kids, but they had a different feel, like they were from a different nation. And these kids were both from Illinois. So that's why I think we have a bifurcation in our culture of agrarian rural living and city living, suburban living, that shouldn't be there. I think that we need to get the suburban kids taking care of animals too and growing gardens too, so they can get a sense of what it's like to take care of something besides their own needs and wants.
You were mentioning sending the kids around the world and experience different cultures.
Yeah,
Well, sometimes you can do this on almost like a micro
exactly.
level, like local level.
Yes,
You take these suburban kids and go in the rural area and vice versa. You
yep,
already have this exchange and this experience. It doesn't
absolutely.
have to be a linguistic exchange either. Sometimes it's just a question of culture within the same country.
Yeah, I'm sure in Sweden there's a diversity of culture. Just 50 miles away or less, you have a diversity of culture because you have agrarian culture in Sweden too, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And in Sweden, even like in the region where I used to live in Dalarna, like on the stretch of 50 kilometers, you can have two, three different dialects, and they're very, very different.
No kidding.
So they've been preserving ways of talking that are um, very different than the standard Swedish you can hear in Stockholm, and even here in the south of Sweden, there is also a very strong dialect that is. And then actually, if you look at these, I mean, I love linguistics, but if you look at Norwegian, Swedish, and Danish, they are very similar languages, especially when they're written.
Right.
But yeah, what you can make a parallel with what you were explaining.
Yeah, I sent my brother and sister and I. We had summer jobs, and we all bought my parents tickets to fly to Italy. My dad had never been to Italy, and he was probably in his 70s at this point in time.
But he was born in the United States,
Yes, yes, but
from
yeah,
Italian
yeah,
parents,
yes, and he
grandparents.
spoke Italian, but he never went. So we kind of forced the issue. He said, "Well, here's these tickets. You can throw them away, but they're already paid for. You got to go or throw them away." So they went, right? And my dad gets off the plane, and he's like, he's talking in Italian, and they say, "Come here, come here, come here. Say what you just said to my friend." And then he'd say, blah, blah, blah. And they're like laughing, not laughing at him mean wise, but they're like, he was a time capsule of
Yeah.
19th century Italian, because that's what he learned, right? And I'll give you another example. My professor in college, my classics professor, went to Greece, right? Well, he spoke Homeric Greek, right? Like Homeric Greek, not even like
Wow.
like the Greek of the Bible, but Homeric Greek.
Mm.
So he goes there and gets off the plane, and they all call him Homer. Because they could kind of understand what you're saying, but it was like listening to like Chaucer if you were English, right? You'd be like the Chaucer started talking to you, and Chaucer or Beowulfian, English. So it's language is very interesting. And so you mentioned to me you were a linguist. How are you a linguist? How does that manifest itself?
I'm not a linguist, but I studied some linguistic at university. So I wouldn't say that I'm a linguist, but I'm interested in languages.
Yeah.
So it's like you probably noticed, I'm interested in almost everything. So
Right.
I'm all over the place. I find everything interesting. I want to learn a bit more of everything, and that's kind of a curse
Yeah.
because it's time consuming. But luckily, I'm a workaholic. I don't need much sleep, so I have a lot of time to discover and experiment things. And like right now, the thing is that I have phases in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And like you mentioned before, like in the last 11 months, I focused a lot on writing this book, working on the teaching and promotion of these teaching methods. You mentioned the phase where I was playing baseball very seriously. You mentioned the phase where I spent a lot of time writing and producing and recording songs. There's so many different phases like this in my life. I mean, sometimes I just like give my 100% in studying or in like trying to. And I know that I will continue to be like this for the rest of my life. Even like recently, I tried pottery, and I said, "Oh, I can imagine myself like becoming really good at this when I'm old, and I'm gonna do it again." And so I get this like spark when I try something new. I imagine the possibilities and the potential. So I'm interested in everything. That's a
Right.
curse.
And it's a blessing too. And the idea of I know Finnish teachers in the Michael Moore documentary about Finland, Finnish teaching, Finnish schools. There was a woman teacher who said, she said, well, the reason why we teach these kids what we do is because we're concerned about their happiness. And Michael Moore was blown away by that answer. Like this is all about the child's happiness, but it's not about the happiness of like of them getting candy whenever they want candy. She was talking about a different kind of happiness, wasn't she? About the long-term project of lifelong happiness. And it's kind of what you're talking about too, because long-term thinking is that there's Jordan Peterson talks about this, but there's yourself, but there's also the actions you take for your future selves. So you might deal with a little bit of practice now because that concert you're going to perform in, that rock concert, you don't want to mess up. Right. So you're working towards the your future happiness, not your present happiness. And if you can get a kid understanding that, then they understand why they study and why they're doing things that might not be comfortable. Right. They want to win a game. So they're going to do repetition and practice catching a ball and dribbling a basketball, whatever it is. Right. So you're teaching them how to work for their future happiness, which is an elevated state of existence. Right. That preserves society. You know, we do these things for long-term happiness. You want to address that a little bit, because I think that's what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah. The only thing is that I'm getting really, really tired. It's past 10 here, but
so your long-term happiness would be going to bed. That would
yeah. I actually right now I feel that like for the last 10-15 minutes I'm trying to just stay awake. It's super interesting having a conversation with you, but like I said, I don't need much sleep, but I woke up very early this morning.
See, I just drink lots of coffee, so I'm fine.
Oh yeah, I should have, but then I won't sleep at all.
We'll save the question of long-term happiness for the next interview.
Yeah, we need to have another round when the book is out.
Yep.
Not only to promote the book, but to continue this wonderful conversation, because it's always super inspiring talking to you. And like I said, I'm going to be able also to give you more feedback about the wonderful pedagogical material that you have invented. I'm going to have my students try it and probably make discoveries with it, because it is so like organic. I mean, like what you invented is so it's flexible, and there's rigidity as well. So I mean, I feel very inspired, and
I'm really thrilled that they're over there in Sweden with your kids. Yeah. That was a thrill for us. And yeah, we just found out next year that we'll be being sold in France and Germany, and we're in Japan, and we'll be in South Korea hopefully. So it's fun to see the blocks in different kids' hands around the world. So we're on the same project, and different aspects.
It's like the next level Lego. Because the way they're put in action, it's going to lead to discoveries eventually.
Yeah, well,
some kids will find out new ways to solve problems by using their creativity, using them.
We just discovered they make sea turtles, baby sea turtles. So
nice.
It is the Japanese want baby sea turtles, so we made them baby sea turtles. So that's pretty cool too.
And what's great is that the first time my student tried this, they didn't have any instructions. I just say, like, just let your imagination go wild. And I mean, I'm for pure creativity, and that goes in the whole like narrative I've been talking about for the last 2 years. There's a lot of ingredient there, and I think that we're going to be able to go into details when we talk about the upcoming book.
I can't wait. Okay, well, you go to bed. Say goodnight to your children and beautiful wife if not already sleeping. And we'll talk again. Thank you so much for being on my show, Philippe.
Thanks, Mike. It was a pleasure.
Okay.
See you soon.
Okay.
Greetings from Sweden.
Thank you from America. Bye-bye.
Take care.